Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Kamini. My name is Kamini, and I'm a first-year master's student in the SCM EPI department, and my concentration track is clinical trials and evidence synthesis. And I'd just like to thank you today for joining in my RIP session. So I haven't come. I know that these RIP sessions are a way to get some ideas on your and feedback on your thesis project, among other things. But I haven't worked out on my thesis idea completely. And since we are still at the beginning of this new term and it's like coming out of the vacation, we thought we'll just take this slow, and maybe my advisor, Dr. Irwin, and I thought that we can just present with my previous and current research work that I'm doing. And I'd like to, after this presentation, so I'll just be taking you through my journey of the research that I've done so far, that I'm currently working on. And if you feel that something I would have done better or something I could have done a bit differently, then I would love to hear your feedbacks. So let me just share my slide. Can everyone see my slide? Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that everyone can see my screen.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Okay, so let's start with my research when my research and interest began. And honestly, it has just nurtured throughout the years, but it did begin during my internship years of PharmD, that's Doctor of Pharmacy. I did get an opportunity to work as a clinical pharmacist in with a leading rheumatologist in Pune. And my work with him basically included patient counseling, checking prescriptions, and verifying them. Then I also worked on creating some leaflets in native languages. And as time passed, we decided to go ahead and do a cross-sectional study in order to determine the axial spondyloarthritis in India. We determined the delay in progress, the delay in diagnosis, the impact on work productivity, and the attitude of patients towards treatment. Reason we did this study is because at that time there were no Indian studies which could determine the impact of axial spondyloarthritis on work productivity and patients' perspective towards the use of complementary medicines in rheumatology. This was an interesting work for me because this was the first project that I had worked on completely on my, I was responsible for everything from literature review to analysis to writing a manuscript with the guidance of my advisor, of course. This was a cross-sectional study in which we did a convenient sampling to include around 100 patients in the study. We used various disease activity questionnaires and also designed investigator data collection form to collect data on patients. We conducted a face-to-face interview with these patients and got them to fill the data activity scores, and also used various clinical parameters, clinical investigations to as a part of our data collection. I would just briefly describe the major findings of the study. We did find that there was an average delay, a median delay of 2 years from the onset of symptoms to the diagnosis. We did find that more than 50% of the patients visited all sorts of specialists before they reached a rheumatologist, because in India, the term rheumatology is still new. People are still not aware that a specialist is available for this kind of a disease. There was a severe impact on work productivity due to this disease. We found that around 8% of the patients had to in fact quit their job due to this illness because it was becoming very difficult for them to have this condition and work. We also found that in 58% of the patients, there was a misconception about the use of these medicines. Some of the patients, like around 30% of the patients, did believe that doctors deliberately conceal the side effects of these medications. And we concluded by saying that there needs to be a patient referral pathway which can make it easy for the patients to reach a rheumatologist, and that there are a lot of misconceptions about the use of medicines in rheumatology, and these misconception needs to be addressed. While working on this project, we did realize that some patients mentioned about some patients did mention about the mental distress of this disease, and we did some literature review at that time, and we found that there are no Indian studies which did determine the impact of mental illness on these patients. So we went ahead and decided to do another study which included which was on determining the anxiety and depression among patients with axial spondyloarthritis. I'm also happy to say that this article was recently published in the European Journal of Rheumatology and is also available to review if anyone is interested. In this study, we did a cross-sectional survey to identify the clinically significant symptoms of anxiety and depression among patients with axial spondyloarthritis. We used the standardized questionnaires, which are also validated in Hindi and Marathi, which are the regional languages in the state we conducted this study. We had a practicing psychiatrist on board with this study. We identified that the clinically significant symptoms of anxiety and depression were present in 38 and 36% of these patients, which is a lot worrisome because almost all of the times it goes unnoticed. These symptoms were associated with younger age of disease onset, high disease activity, poor quality of sleep, high impact on work productivity, as well as the misbeliefs of the medicine used in the treatment. With this study, we concluded that there is a high prevalence of the symptoms, and patients should regularly all these patients who have axial spondyloarthritis need to be regularly screened for these symptoms. Okay, so by the time my internship years were over, I was looking for a job, and then COVID happened, and nothing or very little was known about this disease at the time. And that's when I got an opportunity to work as a clinical research coordinator in the Department of Critical Care Medicine for COVID trials. I saw this opportunity to contribute as a healthcare worker towards the community, and then started my work as a clinical research coordinator. During this time, I got a chance to work in the second largest COVID trial, which is the Solidarity trial initiated by WHO. I think the first one was the recovery trial, in where we got the findings that DEXA being a good treatment for COVID. The interim results of this trial, the Solidarity trial, are available online. So in this trial, this trial began with 4 major drug arms and 1 standard of care arm. Patients were randomized to lopinavir, ritonavir, HCQs, interferon, plus lopinavir, ritonavir, remdesivir. And as the trials progressed and analysis was started, one by one, each arm was eventually withdrawn due to futility. And by the time I had given up, I had resigned due to starting my master's degree here, this trial had come to a halt. And unfortunately, we didn't have any progress with the medication of COVID, but I do believe that the trial is back on, and they are experimenting with some new combinations of some other repurposed drugs and also some monoclonal antibodies. I did get a chance to work on some pharma-sponsored trials, mainly phase 2 and phase 3, but due to copyright reasons, I was not able to disclose. I won't be able to disclose much about them. And my work as a clinical research coordinator in India mainly included screening patients' record and databases and referrals and identifying the patients who are eligible for the study. I also participated in the closeout visits and the initiation visits of the sponsors, and was involved in the ethics committee meetings for initiation of these studies and for reporting of adverse reactions and serious adverse reaction. I used to also file the ECRF and train interns and nurses with the clinical trial protocol, and was also responsible for managing the trial budget. I was also responsible for managing the trial budget. Apart from this, there was some studies which were going on, which were investigator-initiated study, and I was also responsible for the data collection and literature review of those studies. And I also designed a standard operating procedure for the management of medicines in the ICU, in which I was working as a CRC. Coordinating activities of the MAHA ACT, or the Maharashtra Acute Care Training Act, the Maharashtra Acute Care Training, or the MAHA Act as we call it, was the last project that I worked on. This study, the aim of this study was to assess the preparedness and the training needs for acute care in various dedicated COVID hospitals and healthcare centers across Maharashtra. The study is still ongoing. And one interesting thing about this study was that this was done in collaboration with the Maharashtra State Health Department and the Japaigo team of Johns Hopkins. It was a part of their ECO program, which is extension for community healthcare outcome project. While working as a CRC, we decided to conduct a study on the direct medical cost analysis of Indian COVID-19 patients requiring critical care admission. I want to discuss this study in a bit more depth because we have seen a recent surge in the COVID cases, and it is important to address this issue as COVID can be a huge economic burden on patients who are being admitted to ICU. So a bit background of why we did this study. So intensive care is expensive and the cost of providing ICU care in COVID can vary as per geographical regions. In India, intensive care is one of the primary drivers of hospital care cost and which can account to around 20 to 30% of the hospital budget. The penetration of health insurance in India is very low. It's only around 15% in rural and 20% in the urban areas of India. It means that the out-of-pocket expenditure constitutes a lot to these total healthcare expenses. And intensive care in India is provided by private sector and costs are mostly borne by the patients out of pocket. The COVID pandemic has likely to increase the economic burden on these patients. And the time we did this study, there was still a paucity of data from India regarding the cost of direct medical care for hospitalized COVID-19 patients. So we did decide to go ahead and do this study. And this is the overview of the methods, the methodology that we followed. The study was done in a tertiary care trust teaching hospital, which is also a dedicated COVID hospital and which has around 350 dedicated COVID beds, of which 75 were ICU beds. Data was mainly abstracted. This was a retrospective study. Data was extracted from the medical and the billing records of the patients who were admitted to the ICU from June to December. It was a 6-month duration for which we abstracted the data. The data included patients who were either directly admitted to ICU or who had to be later shifted to ICU due to deteriorating conditions, deteriorating hypoxia or other complications. We excluded patients who were transferred from other hospitals because they also had to bear cost there. So we were not aware of the total expenditure they had there. So it was not right to include their stay during these periods only because their COVID expenditure would include the cost they borne in the outside hospital as well. We also excluded those patients who seek discharge against medical advice and patients who were referred to other hospital on the relative's request. In this study, we included a total of, we found that a total of 347 patients were admitted to ICU who met the criteria of ICU admission. But from that, 171 patients met our inclusion criteria and 76% of them were males. 72% of the study population had at least one comorbidity, of which hypertension was the commonest. Insurance scheme accounted for 87% patients, of which 78 individuals availed the government health scheme. And this table describes the demographic and other clinical characteristics of the entire population. So we found that in the present study, a patient who was admitted to the hospital had to bear a median cost of around $2,700. According to the classification of cost as per hospital policy, IPD charges, that is the inpatient department charges, contributed to the maximum of the total cost. Within IPD cost, a major contributory factor was the biosafety protection cost, followed by physician consultation, miscellaneous charges, biomedical waste management, and administrative charges. Miscellaneous charges included anything between indoor bookkeeping charges, diet consultation charges, zipper bag charges, and among other things. If one were to consider the top 7 contributors to the cost, hospital drugs and disposable contributed to the maximum, followed by bed charges, equipment, biosafety gear, lab investigations and radiology, clinical management, and biomedical waste management. The table 5 compares the healthcare cost with various demographic and clinical factors. Among various demographic characteristics and comorbidities, only diabetes mellitus had a significant association with increased cost. Patients who developed septic shock also did have a significant higher cost of treatment, and a median delay. We did observe that patients who had a median delay of more than 4 days in admission, and a median delay of admission to the hospital, and a median delay of more than 6 days of admission to the ICU, resulted a significantly higher cost of hospitalization. The total hospital expenses for patients with hospital or ICU was more than it was twice the so if the delay in diagnosis, delay in admission was more than 4 days to the hospital and more than 6 days to the ICU, the extra cost borne by a patient was twice. It was $2,200. We found that the mean cost of hospitalization for a COVID-19 patient who required ICU admission was around $3,000. This cost may seem low compared to that we observe in the US, but it is still quite higher for a common middle-class family in India. The average annual income of a middle-class family from India can range anywhere from 4 lakh INR to 6 lakh INR, which is somewhat around $6,000 to $8,000. And now imagine from $6,000, like $3,000 being spent in the treatment of COVID, which is quite a substantial cost. The lower cost in our study could be explained due to the substantially lower cost of drugs, equipment and disposable, lower salaries to healthcare professionals, and also lower standard of living. The median direct hospitalization cost was significantly higher in patients with diabetes, with sepsis, and those who required high flow nasal oxygen, non-invasive ventilation, and mechanical ventilation. The findings of this study were similar to those found in the other parts from the world. The median direct hospitalization cost also correlated with the length of ICU stay and hospital stay. Longer lead time to admission significantly correlated with increased cost. This may be because patients presenting late take longer time to recover, thus entailing increased cost. A major finding of this study was that we found a deficient between the actual cost incurred and the amount obtained through reimbursement by the government scheme and through private insurance and self-paying patients. These differences were higher from the government scheme. The COVID-specific ICU package in government scheme for a ventilated patient in India is just $850. So a patient whose bill has been $3,000, for him, the government is giving only $850. So the rest patient is not able to pay. And since this is a trust hospital, the sum of the money does come from the trust funds, but that means that the rest of the money was a loss to the hospital. The difference in amount between the maximum package provided by the government scheme and actual median cost per patient was around $800. This deficit, we said, could be addressed by increasing the insurance amount, the government insurance amount for these patients. For this, from this study, we concluded that the ICU admission of COVID-19 patients imposes a substantial direct medical cost, and this cost can be associated with the ICU admission and longer ICU stay and hospital stay, and diabetes and sepsis, and requirement of HFNC, NIV, and mechanical ventilation. The increased cost of, we did say that the increased cost of the drug and disposables and the protective gears can be mitigated by the government control and prices, and that the government healthcare expenditure as a percent of GDP does need to increase to improve the delivery of tertiary care to these patients and to reduce the economic burden. And of course, further studies are required to explore the impact of indirect medical care cost associated with COVID. Okay, so now we are at Johns Hopkins. I won't overemphasize this, but when I started my coursework in term 1, I was quite overwhelmed and anxious most of the time. I still am, to be honest. I am sure most of us feel the same, but I also wanted to get involved in the clinical trials process in the US because the regulatory process here is a lot different than India, and I wanted to understand how this works. So I contacted my advisor, Dr. Irwin, and she got me in touch with Dr. Sezin Karakush. Dr. Karakush is an assistant professor of ophthalmology in the Wilmer Eye Institute of Johns Hopkins, and I had an amazing time working with her. I got to learn a great deal of regulatory process. I worked on regulatory submission for a phase 3 trial sponsored by Dompe Pharmaceuticals. And the new thing that I learned during this time was the process of a centralized ethics committee, IRB. The concept was news to me when I worked in India. I mean, I still knew what it was, but it was still in the introductory phase to Indian pharmaceutical companies. So so I got to explore that concept of reliance IRB also while working with Dr. Karakush, and I got to know about the different forms that we use for submission, such as like the form 356H and the form 1572. I was lucky enough to get this opportunity, and also I'm proud that this was the beginning of the research career at Johns Hopkins. My work with Dr. Karakush ended in December, and that's when I got an opportunity to work with yet amazing person, Dr. Jacqueline Campbell from the School of Nursing. She is well known for her research in the field of intimate partner violence and homicide, and that's one of the projects that I'm working with on her. I'm working with her. She was more than happy to allow me to include this work for my presentation today. Currently, there are two parts of this entire project that I'm working on, which are preventing and assessing intimate partner homicide risk and a comparison of firearm-related intimate partner homicide in Texas and Maryland, prevention, identification, and those at risk, and the effect of firearm regulations. Both these studies are case control studies in which we identify the cases from various sources, major of them being the sources we retrieve from the data we retrieve from the police department, the medical examiner's office, and through code searches. We then extracted the data using Qualtrics, which is a data collection tool that has been developed, and we focus on the cases that occurred from 2016 to 2019. The cases we collect belong to two types, either intimate partner homicide or intimate partner violence related homicide. An intimate partner homicide refers to a homicide in which an individual is a current or a former intimate partner, and an intimate partner could be someone with whom one has had romantic or sexual relationships. Whereas an intimate partner violence related homicide occurs when the person who was killed was not themselves the intimate partner of the perpetrator, but in this case, either there is a known history of intimate partner violence, or the perpetrator attempted or successfully killed their partner and other children. So this may include the victim's children, the victim's parents, or anyone who has any connection to the victim. Currently, we are collecting data from 6 states: Arizona, New Jersey, Oregon, Missouri, Maryland, and Texas. And through the findings of this study, we aim to help the criminal justice and social service agencies develop and refine risk-informed policies to decrease and prevent intimate partner homicide. So my responsibilities for this project mainly include undertaking required trainings, attending meetings, and being involved in discussion, data abstraction and collection, flyer designing. Also for this flyer that I am just working on, we are in need of some stock photos which portray people of various ethnicities. So if anyone has any idea where I can get these stock photos from, where it won't be a copyright issue, please let me know so I can work on that. I also assist the PI with tasks as assigned, and currently I'm working on the New Jersey master file, where I'm looking to identify potential cases from the New Jersey state. I have added a brochure. So this is a brochure which could become a potential brochure for the Texas Maryland conference. And if anyone is interested in knowing more about this study, you can get in touch with Professor Campbell, and I'm sure she'll be delighted to discuss this further with you. And this is the second part of that. So I just wanted to show you the brochure that we have been working on. And so yeah, that's the last slide for my presentation today. And I just wanted to say that I'm excited for what's more to come, and hope you have enjoyed this journey with me today. So thank you. And if you do have any feedbacks or comments on things that I could have done better for my research so far, so please let me know. Thank you.
Excellent job, Kamini.
Thank you.
Had a lot of exciting research experiences since you started here at Hopkins, even before Hopkins, you know, you've done a lot of good research, but you've taken advantage of working with a lot of different faculty just to learn a little bit about clinical trials. So what do you think in terms of your next steps, in terms of your next research project? Would you like to work on another trial? And you will be also working with Dr. Campbell on the case control studies, but tell us a little bit about what you envision for like your second year, what kind of experiences you're looking forward to.
So for second year, I am definitely looking for more clinical trial experiences, because I feel that our track has been designed in such a way that it will lead us to that direction, where we can give more inputs, but we can have an impact or at least make a change in the clinical trial industry. And of course, I plan to continue my work with Dr. Campbell, provided I am also doing well in my coursework. And but yeah, I also like want to get into something into systematic reviews, because that's something that I've never explored. I have like I am taking some courses online on that, but I've never really written a systematic review. So that's something that I plan to do next year. Does anyone else has any comment? I guess not.
Well, if there are no comments, thank you so much for sharing your research experiences. It was very informative and very helpful for all the students just to hear what you've been doing and what you've been working on. So thank you very much, Kamini.
Thank you. Hello.
All right. I think we'll wrap up then.
Yes, I think, yeah, I understand this was a short presentation, but short work so far. So I hope next time when I present, it will be a longer presentation.
It was very informative, very, very interesting.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for joining.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.